Kids in foster care have usually experienced traumatic situations in their lives. They could have been around domestic violence, been a victim of abuse themselves, been regularly neglected by their parents, or even had the cops raid their home, which can be really scary. And when we go through traumatic situations, we have ways to cope and deal with what is going on. Most of us have heard of fight, flight, or freeze. These are reactions to stress that can keep us safe in dangerous situations. However, you could also call them trauma responses if they're still coming up even when you are safe. So fight, obviously, is when you fight back, you get angry, and you may attack whoever is threatening you. Flight is when you flee from whatever is threatening you. And when you freeze, you're kind of stopping where you are, waiting to make a decision, and this can sometimes buy you time to make the best decision of whether fight is right to do or flee is right to do in that situation. It can also be a way to just completely disassociate if you don't really want to do either of those things. But there is a fourth, lesser known trauma response that is very common in adopted children, the Fawn Response. So today, let's talk about what the Fawn Response is and how you can recognize it in your child. Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you happen to be new here, my name is Katie, and I'm a mom to 3 amazing kids who we adopted from foster care. And now I work as a foster care adoption consultant to help families like yours adopt waiting children, navigate the parenting of adoptive children, you name it, I do it. And I am super excited to announce that we are very, very close to opening the doors to the Adopt Together community, which is an online group to support foster and adoptive parents. The thing is, adopting from foster care can be a confusing and lonely experience, both before you bring your children home and after. By joining this community, you will be a part of a Facebook group where you can ask all of your questions anytime they come to your mind. You will also get targeted training, so every month we pick a topic that's relevant to foster care adoption, and there will be exclusive video trainings just for the members of that community. And the whole point of these trainings is to help you be the best adoptive parent you can be. And this is the part that I'm most excited about with the community, but every month we're going to be offering a group coaching call that anyone who's in the community can get on, and we can discuss what you're going through. We can talk about your feelings and your worries and help you get insight on how to deal with those things. So if you are interested in joining this group, the doors are opening later in July, but I highly recommend that you click the link in the description below to join the wait list. This group will only be open for a short window of time before we close the doors again. So check that link in the description box and get on the wait list within 30 seconds. All right, let's talk about the Fawn Response in adopted children and what that exactly is. So first of all, I want to state that I am not a mental health professional. I am simply an adoptive mom who has learned a lot over the years, has done a lot of research, and has wanted to learn things to help myself in my own parenting journey. And so I want to share some of that information with you if you are hoping to do the same. So the Fawn Response can look like people pleasing, fawning over someone, flattering them, etc. And the truth is that in a dangerous situation, this can actually be a really effective strategy to keep yourself safe. I don't know if we've got any other true crime people out there, but I am definitely someone who gets really into that. However, I prefer the stories where the people actually survive and are able to get out because I think it's really interesting to see the strategies they use. And a lot of survivors of kidnappings in particular were able to escape by using the Fawn Response. They would pretend to like the person and enjoy being with the person who has kidnapped them, which caused that person to let their guard down. And then the one who's been kidnapped can escape more easily because they're not being as guarded, thinking you're gonna run away all the time. And a lot of people will use this if they have someone in their lives who is abusing them. They can actually use the Fawn Response to make that person happy and have a less likely chance that that person is going to be abusive towards them at that time. So while it can be helpful in those really dangerous situations, and it's actually a good tool to deal with, just in the same way that fight or flight can be helpful. If you're fighting off someone or if you are fleeing from a dangerous situation, all of those things can be great survival skills. But we call them a trauma response when you are in a safe situation and you are still utilizing those stress responses in a non-traumatic environment. So if we think about our foster and adopted children, they have most likely, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, they have gone through so many difficult things in their lives, whether they faced abuse by a parent or guardian, whether they were neglected, or if they just witnessed some scary things. So what can the fawn response look like specifically from a foster and adopted child? Now, I can tell you from experience, I had one of my children in particular utilize the fawn response so much. And it's hard because a lot of strangers, or not strangers, but like acquaintances, people that we knew that would meet this child would be like, oh my goodness, they're so sweet and they're so nice and they just automatically loved me. And it's like, that's actually a trauma response. That's actually not great. So what does it look like when a foster child does that? So first of all, they will always be complimenting you in these grand, outrageous type of compliments, like, you are the best parent in the whole world, or you are so beautiful. And they tell you it an inordinate amount of times. They're telling you how great you are, how wonderful you are. And what's hard is it doesn't always feel very genuine because it very well isn't. Now, don't get me wrong, you might be the best parent ever, you might be beautiful, you might be great. But you have to realize that the child is not saying this necessarily because they believe those things. They're doing this as a trauma response. Another thing is that they can spend their time trying to prove to you how good they are and how wonderful they are. And if they're ever doing something that's the right thing to do, they're gonna make sure that you saw it. So when you're around, they may try really hard to prove that they're the best brother or sister, or they're the best reader, or they're the best helper or person who does chores. They're going to try to do things to prove to you that they are valuable and that you should care for them. And another thing that we saw in particular was hanging around people a little too much when you've just met them, and again, showering them with compliments and praise, and kind of getting too close too fast with people they just met. So for example, this would be like if a child met another kid at the park, they were only playing together that day, and then they continued to call that person their best friend ever. And so these are some signs that you might notice. And what's hard about this is that the things they're saying, the only reason they're doing this, even like I said, if you are great, if you are wonderful, that's not necessarily not true, but the reason they're doing it is to stay safe. Because a lot of kids in foster care and kids who have just experienced neglect in general have learned that in order to be loved and cared for, you have to kind of prove your worth. And this is why with adoption from foster care, you'll often have that honeymoon stage. When your child first moves in, they're going to be on their very best behavior. You're going to be like, wow, this child is the most perfect child, well-behaved child in the whole world. For some of them. One of my children in particular did not have a honeymoon phase. It was just instantly to difficult behaviors. But in some ways that was better because that was building trust. Whereas like the honeymoon period really shows a lack of trust. It shows a lack of security that they believe you'll take care of them. They think they have to prove their worth, and that you will kick them out or just not give them food or not give them what they need unless they're kind of sucking up to you and pretending like you're the best thing ever. And so, you might ask yourself, if the child is doing all these nice things, like they're behaving well and they're complimenting people and they're being kind, is it really such a bad thing to have a fawn response? And the answer is yes. Here's why. First of all, it is a huge sign that a child may have PTSD if they are constantly using the fawn response in everyday situations that are not dangerous in any way. And what that shows us is that their bodies are on high alert all the time. They're not feeling safe. And because they're not feeling safe, they need to constantly prove themselves so that they know they will be cared for. Second reason it's a bad thing, and I mentioned this earlier, but those compliments are not genuine. They're out of fear. And so you may think as the parent, like, oh wow, they're really bonding with me. They're really connecting with me if they think those things. But that's a false sense of connection, because if they are only doing that in order to make sure that you care for them, then there's no connection or trust there, because that they are worried. They're constantly in that state of worry that you are going to abandon them or something if they're not constantly praising you and giving you that positive feedback. And so it's a clear sign that your child is not comfortable or safe enough with you to let their guard down. And so that is why it's concerning. And I think one of the scariest things of it is that it could turn into safety issues around strangers. If they're constantly, everyone they meet, kind of fawning over to try to prove themselves, to make sure that adults care for them, all of these things, that can become dangerous very quickly, because they could meet someone like a stranger on the street when they're playing outside, and they could start kind of fawning over them, and then that stranger can get the wrong idea and realize they're kind of an easy target, and you get the idea. And what's really hard about all of these, whether it's, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, it's hard because it's so complex, to where if you are in a dangerous situation, those reactions are actually something that are built into us to help us survive. But the problem comes when you don't need them anymore and your body is still on high alert. And so for our children, those reactions that once were super helpful to them and helped keep them safe now are kind of reducing their quality of life and hindering some of their relationships that they could have. Now, I don't plan to go into how to fix your child's fawn response here, because it is such a complex topic, but I can give just a couple little words of advice to encourage you if you're noticing these behaviors from your children. So number one is you want to build trust between you and your child. You want to show that child that even when they're not good, even when they're not being nice to you, they're not following the rules, all of those things, that you still love them and you will still take care of them, because that is what they're afraid of. They're afraid that if they do something wrong, or if they're not being their very best selves all the time, that you will reject them. Maybe they're worried you'll send them back to foster care. Maybe they're worried that you won't take care of them as well as you would take care of another kid. There's all sorts of things they could be fearful of. So if you can build up that trust and prove to them, like when they do something wrong, when they do something that could really upset you, maintaining calm and being able to tell them, I still love you. I'm disappointed in what happened, but I still love you. Those things can go a long way. We try to do it both in those situations and just in general. Like we'll make comments to our kids like, hey, you know that even if you did something absolutely horrible, I would still love you and I would still be your parent. I'm not going anywhere. We're not going to get rid of you. We're never going to do that. I think it's helpful to have both. Show it with your actions, but we always say actions speak louder than words, but sometimes kids need you to say it too. So we try to make a sense of saying those things. One thing I did with one of my children in particular used to compliment me all the time, to the point where I was uncomfortable, because I just knew it wasn't genuine. It was from a trauma response. And so what I would tell this child is I would say, those are really kind words, and I appreciate that you're thinking nice thoughts about me, but I don't need you to say that. I'm going to love you even if you never say that to me. I'm going to love you even if you never tell me I'm beautiful, or if you never tell me I'm the best mom. You don't have to do those things to earn my love. And it's interesting because it did help when I said that. It was like, I think that maybe sometimes our kids don't even realize that's why they're doing it. They're not, they're not in that like metacognition where they can analyze why they're doing things and why they're thinking things and what they're thinking. And so that can be helpful just to kind of call it out, and not in a way it's like, hey, I know you're doing that, just faking it. Not that, but saying things like, hey, those are some really sweet words, but I just want to let you know, you say those things a lot and you don't have to. I'm going to love you even if you never give me a compliment. I think that can just help them get an idea. And third, I would say just make sure if your child is doing this type of response over and over, or if they're hypervigilant in any way, they're kind of that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, that you are getting them into therapy. So find a licensed therapist who can work with your child. And especially if you can find someone who has experience working with children with PTSD or adopted children. There are some therapists that specialize in EMDR, I believe is the acronym, which is like a way to treat PTSD. So all of those things would be good to look for in a therapist. When I've looked for therapists in the past for our kids, I often use Psychology Today's website because they have a search feature. You can search for therapists by different filters like insurance, location, whether it's online or in person, what types of specialties they have, what ages of people they work with, etc. So all three of those things can go a long way. So your actions, your words, and then also getting them into therapy. So I hope this video helped you, whether you haven't adopted yet and you just want to know what to expect, or if you have adopted and you're dealing with a child who's exhibiting this fawn response constantly. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, if you could give a thumbs up on the video, that just helps more people find it. And please do not forget to get on the wait list for the group. By getting on the wait list, you're not committing to being in the group. You're just going to be able to get a notification from me once the group officially opens, and there will be some nice bonuses involved. So click the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week.